Coming up on The World Today. China's President Xi Jinping claims the country has completely eradicated poverty. Hundreds of buildings burned around a town in Ethiopia's conflict-hit Tigray region. Plus, the U.S. said to be preparing to release an intelligence report on the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Akaite Afia in Lagos, Nigeria. The story about Dubai's missing princess takes a new turn as Princess Latifah calls on the UK police to reinvestigate the kidnapping of her older sister, Princess Shamisa, from a Cambridge street more than 20 years ago. According to the BBC, Latifah tells Cambridgeshire police this could help free Princess Shamisa, who was captured on the orders of her father. She was just 18 then, is now 39, and has not been seen in public since. It was only last week the world learned about shocking videos of Princess Latifah secretly recorded on a phone that she had been given, in which she described how she was being held hostage by her father following a failed escape attempt in 2018. The UN has since asked the UAE for proof she is still alive. But almost 2 decades later, an attempt by her older sister to flee the family also ended in capture and imprisonment. We turn to China now as President Xi Jinping has reason enough to smile today as he declares the country has scored overall victory in the fight against poverty. He made the announcement while addressing a grand gathering in Beijing to mark the country's accomplishments in poverty alleviation and to honor people it describes model poverty fighters.
President Xi has attributed the country's success in poverty reduction to the leadership of the Communist Party of China and the people-centered development philosophy. The president, who is also the General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee and Chairman of the Central Military Commission, made the remarks in his speech at the gathering, marking the country's accomplishments in poverty eradication and commending role models at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. He said, the remarkable achievements of China's fight against poverty are inseparable from the strong leadership of the party, the spirit of self-reliance and hard struggle of the Chinese nation, the accumulation of a solid material foundation since the founding of the People's Republic of China, especially since the beginning of its reform, and opening up efforts, the perseverance of one leadership after another, and the solidarity of the whole party and all ethnic groups. Since the launch of the reform and opening up drive in 1978, 770 million impoverished rural residents have shaken off poverty when calculated in accordance with China's current poverty line. China has also contributed more than 70% of global poverty reduction over the same period. The president says shaking off poverty is not the finishing line, but the starting point of a new life and new endeavor, and urges efforts to effectively consolidate the achievements of poverty eradication and rural vitalization. People with an annual income higher than 4,000 yuan, based on 2020 prices, are defined as having been lifted out of poverty in China. The government has identified that poverty reduction should guarantee access to basic food and clothing for the poverty-stricken population, and 9-year compulsory education for children from poverty-stricken homes. Basic medical needs and good living conditions for the poor population should also be guaranteed. President Xi has also stressed China's political advantage in the course of poverty eradication, saying the country has given full play to the political advantages of its socialist system, which can bring together resources necessary to take on great tasks, thus forming common will and joint actions for poverty eradication.
Well, let's talk to the executive director at Cowrie Assets Limited, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, on this remarkable feat. Mr. Chukwu, thanks for joining us today on the program.
Thank you, Kat, for having me.
Of course. So the first thing that we want to ask you is, what do you make of this claim by the Chinese president, and is it actually possible?
Well, they've done it, and so it's possible. I mean, we have a proof of concept. Just like you said earlier in the program, China was able to reduce the level of poverty in the country from 97% in 1978 to just 1.7% in 2018 in a period of 40 years. And the last 8 years, it has eventually met its target of reducing poverty to zero by the year 2020. So it has done it, so it can be done. What we now need to do is leverage on the proof of concept that we now have with China and see other countries replicate what China has done in reducing poverty or eliminating poverty in their country.
Well, the president's speech to the CPC shows China has never hidden the secret to its success, but this is a model that can be adopted by is it a model that can be adopted by African nations, with many examples of China's sharp power visible across the continent?
Absolutely. I mean, if the African countries have the same political will that China had displayed in eliminating poverty, we can as well learn from what China has done and replicate in Africa. I mean, what they have done is not rocket science. The only thing that is lacking is the political will to drive through this process of eliminating poverty, to bringing poverty level to zero. Some African countries are still increasing the level of poverty because what did China do? China grew its economy and therefore lifted a lot of people out of poverty. Between 1991, 81 and 2013, China lifted 850 million people out of poverty. By just growing its economy and also adopted direct intervention to those areas, particularly rural areas that are difficult to access, where it had to set up industries, intervene in developing skills and improving the quality of education, as well as using social security nets to support those families that are very poor. And China built what they call a poverty register, where it took record of every family that was in extreme poverty. Some of them relocated to areas away from very difficult terrains. Some others intervened through agricultural support. And that's how China did it. So we can as well do it in Africa.
Well, I also figure that somewhere in there, the West has never trusted the Chinese process and have been weary of its influence on Africa, as far as its huge loans for infrastructure development that are visible across the continent. So do you think there is a real concern here, or that all parties are basically seeking the same thing, which is control of Africa's resources and influence on political power?
Well, I think it's basically an issue of competition. Previously, Africans were going cap in hand to the Western countries. Now that China has grown its economy, has become a major political influence and social influence, China considers Africa as one region it can bring into its own political influence. And that will mean that it take Africa away from the Western countries. And as it stands today, China has proven to give more support to African development than the Western countries. So Western countries feel that Africa is taking away one of its jewels, which unfortunately the Western nations did not properly nurture. China is supporting Africa with cheap loans. China is supporting African infrastructure development. And the West has never done as much as China is doing in Africa. So clearly for me, it's a case where the Western countries are feeling that China is taking away or outcompeting them in Africa in terms of winning the hearts and souls of Africans.
All right. Well, thanks so much again, Mr. Chukwu, for joining us today on the program.
My pleasure.
We're still looking into the protests in Myanmar, as social media giant Facebook has banned Myanmar's military and its affiliates from its platforms. More than half of the country's 54 million people use Facebook, which for many is synonymous with the internet. Meanwhile, anti-coup protests continue across the country.
In the protests that have lasted nearly 3 weeks, the people came out again, unrelenting in their demand for the military to step down and their civilian leaders to be reinstated. However, today, shots rang out in Yangon's Tamway township as police advanced on the demonstrators. Earlier, police blocked the gates of Yangon's main university campus, stopping hundreds of students from coming out to demonstrate. A video filmed by a local photojournalist showed a man being attacked in downtown Yangon, after 1,000 military supporters also turned up for a rally in the city. The incident took place outside the Shringla Hotel in Suli, downtown Yangon. At least 2 men had weapons, one holding a knife and the other holding a club as they walked away from the scene. Emergency workers helped the bloodied man after his attackers moved off, but his condition was not known. In the meantime, the family of the protester slain by security forces have held a memorial banquet in her honor on the outskirts of the nation's capital. Maya Toei Toei became the rallying point for hundreds of thousands of demonstrations in towns and cities across Myanmar when video went viral of her being shot in the head by security forces while protesting against the military coup. She died last Friday while in intensive care, where she'd been on life support for 10 days.
North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has charged a Central Military Commission meeting where he called for more control and discipline within the military. The meeting, which held on Wednesday, came amid his drive to rally his ruling Workers' Party to implement new policy goals for the next 5 years that were disclosed in a rare Congress last month, including the ramping up of military power and greater nuclear war deterrence. The meeting addressed a series of problems about political activities and discipline among military officials, and also called for tougher rules to control such matters. Kim said the establishment of revolutionary discipline within the military would decide the survival of the army and the success or failure of its activities. 500 structures have been set ablaze in Ethiopia's Tigray region as a sign of that the conflict is still continuing there. The fires were seen via satellite imagery. They showed at least 508 structures that appeared to have been destroyed by fire over that period, citing the blackening of earth and vegetation, ash circles indicative of roof collapse, and debris from collapsed walls and ceilings. The Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, has declared victory over a rebellious force, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, at the end of November after its fighters withdrew from the region's main cities and towns. But sporadic fighting continues in some parts of Tigray, according to residents and United Nations assessments. The government has acknowledged isolated incidents of shooting, but has said that most fighting has stopped in Tigray. Hundreds of German police have carried out raids in 26 locations across Berlin and neighboring Brandenburg State, following the banning and dissolution of a radical Islamist group in the capital, according to authorities. Berlin's Senate Interior Department said it had outlawed Jamatu Berlin, a young and very radical Jihad Salafist association, also known as Tahid Berlin, saying the group was advocating terrorist attacks. 19 members of the association were the focus of today's raids, and the group had been under surveillance for 2 years. The Senate statement said the group had propagated a martyr cult, supported Islamist State ideology, rejected the German Constitution, and called for Sharia as the sole legitimate law. The Senate said male and female members of the unregistered association met regularly in parks and private homes to teach and pray and spread the group's ideology over the internet and by distributing flyers in public spaces. Still to come on the program. COVID or no COVID, the show must go on as Hollywood prepares for the Golden Globes on Sunday. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching The World Today on Channels Television. The UK's 4 chief medical officers have agreed the COVID-19 alert level should move from 5, its highest, down to 4. Now, this comes as the risk of the NHS being overwhelmed within 21 days has receded, according to them. At least 1,327 people have been admitted to the hospital in the UK as a result of COVID-19 between yesterday and today, bringing the number of those in the hospital for the disease to rise to 16,803. And that brings us to our global update.
The information from the UK comes as global COVID-19 cases exceed 111.7 million, with the total related fatalities surpassing 1.47 million, according to the World Health Organization. According to figures released on Wednesday evening, nearly 10,000 people tested positive for COVID-19 in the UK, bringing the total number of cases in the country to over 4.4 million. Meanwhile, over 18 million people have received their first dose of COVID-19 vaccine by Tuesday. Over in South Africa, the government is aiming to get 1.1 million people vaccinated by the end of March. It started rolling out the Johnson & Johnson vaccine last week. So far, 32,000 health workers have been vaccinated. The United States still has the highest number of COVID-19 cases in the world, with over 28.3 million cases and over 500,000 deaths. President Joe Biden on Wednesday extended a formal declaration of a national emergency in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The declaration was brought up on March 13 last year and originally set to expire after 1 year. More inoculation campaigns continue worldwide. Syria says it has just received COVID-19 vaccination doses from a friendly country, and healthcare workers would start receiving inoculations next week. Health officials say Syria is engaged with Russia and China on vaccines, but no bilateral deals have been announced yet. Hungary is also beginning its vaccination program using China's Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccine, making it the first EU country to use a vaccine from China. Most of the 550,000 doses were delivered to 5,000 family doctors on Monday and Tuesday, enough for each doctor to vaccinate 50 or 55 people. And finally, China's foreign ministry has denied that U.S. diplomats in the country had been required to take anal swab tests for COVID-19, following media reports that some had complained about the procedure. U.S. media outlet Vice on Wednesday cited a State Department official as saying the test was given in error and that China had said it would stop such tests on U.S. diplomats.
A declassified version of a U.S. intelligence report that finds Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved the 2018 killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi is expected to be released today, according to officials familiar with the matter. The officials said the report, for which the CIA was the main contributor, assessed that the Crown Prince approved and likely ordered the murder of Khashoggi, whose Washington Post column had criticized the Crown Prince's policies. President Joe Biden, a Democrat who succeeded the Republican Donald Trump 5 weeks ago, told reporters on Wednesday he had read the report and expected to speak soon by phone with 85-year-old Saudi Arabian King Salman, father of the Crown Prince, the country's 35-year-old de facto ruler. The report's release is part of Biden's policy to realign ties with Riyadh after years of giving the Arab ally and major oil producer a pass on its human rights record and its intervention in Yemen's civil war. Biden is working to restore the relationship with Riyadh to traditional lines after 4 years of cozier ties under Trump. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, is standing by with more on this. Maria, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So while we're all curious to know what it is in this report, even though some officials say it implicates the Saudi Crown Prince in Khashoggi's murder, this is not any different than other reports that have been established, correct?
You're exactly correct. The CIA has been investigating this for quite some time now, and back in the in the midst of our election season, they kind of concluded the investigation and basically have found some things that obviously now that we are in the midst of, the almost month now, a little bit over a month of the new administration, President Biden is going to take it very seriously. Obviously, we know the Washington Post reporter, his aim was to build a more tolerant, he was reporting on some of the issues that existed in Saudi Arabia. And so to try to build a more tolerant Saudi Arabia, and obviously that costed his life. And so we are in a position now where you're going to see that this is another way that President Biden is looking at foreign relations. He's taking a strong stand on being able to communicate across the world and globally and to address issues of mass killings. He's addressing issues that exist, and we know that now that the CIA has found some evidence that we're expecting to see very soon, after once which the King of Saudi Arabia and President Biden will have a conversation. And so we can expect in the coming days to get the specifics of the report.
Well, speaking of President Joe Biden, he is supposed to speak with the Saudi king about the contents of the report. So what are you hearing in regards to what he might say to him, keeping in mind that former U.S. President Donald Trump had exonerated Prince Salman of any involvement in this situation?
Well, we also know, as you said earlier, there were much cozier ties. And I think the implication of cozier is not dealing with some of the international relations and being able to have a partnership. But it's more so looking at kind of the personal aspects of it. And I think that what you're going to see President Biden looking at increasing those relationships, but not looking at having personal relationships with the prince, the king, and those within leadership in Saudi Arabia, but looking at more so how to ensure that, one, we're addressing some of the human rights issues that exist. And obviously, most importantly at this time, is addressing the issue with the individual that has been killed. And so we are now at a point where I think that the president is going to have this conversation. He will then be able to provide, which the report has been now developed for quite some time now, be able to provide that information. And then I think he's going to look for a response from the king that will address this, so that this can obviously will lead to further relations between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. And hopefully, I think what the president is hopeful for, they'll be able to address some of the human rights challenges. And I think what the reporter was obviously there to work toward in some of his reporting that he did.
All right. Well, Maria, thanks so much again for joining us today. And we'll definitely be looking out for this report that is meant to be released today.
Akante, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. The Golden Globe kicks off a pandemic-era Hollywood awards season on Sunday, February 28th, after a year that upended the entertainment industry and saw celebrities on red carpets replaced with webcams on sofas. Yet somehow the show is going on, albeit without the chummy gala dinners, hordes of photographers, and designer gowns associated with the celebration of the year's best films and TV shows. Sunday's ceremony is to be broadcast live on NBC television, will take place for the first time on two coasts, with comedians Tina Fey hosting from New York and Amy Poehler hosting from Beverly Hills. Some of the presenters, including Michael Douglas and his wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones, will appear in person, but the nominees will attend from their homes or other locations around the world. Scott Feinberg, the awards columnist for the Hollywood Reporter trade magazine, says this awards will look something like what was done for the Emmys in September. Well, that is all for the world today. Thank you all so much for staying with us. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.